I swear to God, I'm going to invade Poland if I see another Polish flag.
Tonight, I smuggle guns to Iraq. Richard works for the Chinese government. And James is sanctioned by the USA. I'm your host, Clarkson Jeremy, and this is Imperigear. The rebellion is over. A new dawn has come. Kim Jong-un has been elected our supreme leader and has taken on the roles that his father left behind. He may only be 18, but he will surely bring about a new era for the Korean people. His first action is to implement Byung-jin in favour of Song-jung, aiming to expand upon the civilian economy while keeping the needs of the military in mind. One of the biggest ventures for this is the expansion of the more legitimate exports of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, that being art, through the Korean Art Film Studio and Mansudae Art Studio, alongside Mansudae Overseas Projects. The soft power and the economy of the Korean nation will expand under these plans, with much more money being brought into the treasury to further help with the expansion of social services for the Korean people.
My friend.
Hello. I've somewhat sorted the tax rate. It's at 40% now. Still very high desires. It's very expensive. Very
Well, take this.
Thank you.
And what we will do in about 30 days is we're going to begin the investment in Pyongyang of a office sector.
Well, thank you very much.
This office sector will greatly increase your taxing capabilities and your GDP as well.
The Supreme Leader would receive aid from the Chinese nation to rebuild Korea and allow it to prosper more than it had even during the 60s during the miracle recovery after the Fatherland Liberation War. However, following the ideology of Juche closely, we cannot rely on China alone, and so Bureaus 38, 39 and 35 have been established to allow for more illicit forms of income for our government. Most primarily, the sale of arms to anti-imperialist powers that would otherwise likely be blocked by the Western imperialists. Ethiopia, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon. Our guns and vehicles arm the soldiers of freedom and protect the revolutionary effort of all people, and the funds received from this will protect our own revolution. There are also discussions of a potential expansion into the drug trade as well as cyber warfare. However, this is still in the early stages and we will likely not see such a program for a while. Our Supreme Leader sought as his first diplomatic act, however, to go to the UN, and for the first time for any leader from our nation, give a speech in the international body, aiming to have the unjust sanctions on our nation withdrawn.
Now we are going to move to the next resolution, which is a resolution submitted by the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, a complete end to the sanctions upon the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. We invite the representative from the Democratic People's Republic of Korea to explain their resolution. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Hello, the United Nations. It's a first for one of my family, but I'm here to argue that the sanctions on our nation are unjust, and with the rebellion that's happened recently, whether you believe they are justified or not, it is a humanitarian requirement that they are removed. The sanctions are impacting our ability to heal our economy sufficiently with nations that we would consider friends, and therefore are harming the Korean people as they try and rebuild from the very destructive rebellion that took place from traitors within our nation.
Thank you very much. Now we open the stage for general debate, and we recognize a speaker from the Socialist Republic of Vietnam.
Greetings, delegates. I think Vietnam is the subject matter expert here when it comes to a rift of country, when it comes to North versus South. And I think for us to extend our arm to North Korea and at least reduce these sanctions will allow us to have a conversation and building out the new regime for North Korea. With the death of Kim Jong-il and the replacement with Kim Jong-un, I think it's our turn and the step in the right direction for us to extend our hand to them. I see my time.
Thank you very much. Now we recognize the speaker from Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We would like to bring to attention the reasons that they have cited for lifting sanctions, which is the suffering of their people. This is only a testament that sanctions do not hurt government. They only hurt the people of these countries. One of these countries of importance to us is Iraq, who suffer similar sanctions. And we would like to see the North Korean sanctions to be lifted as a step in the right direction for countries like Iraq. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we recognize the speaker from Georgia.
I would like to say Vietnam, the speaker spoke of North and South. Korea spoke of the pain it is inflicting on its citizens. I would like to look at my country. Do you understand what the communist menace is doing for us? I believe that sanctions must end when you liberalize and democratize your country. If you want to look at the state of communism and the very references in your constitution, you can change that at any time. You alone have the power. And I believe, and I want everyone here to know, communism is a menace that existed only in the 20th century. It should die in the 20th century. And I believe, and I call on all nations that are communist to liberalize and their people to stand up for what is right.
Thank you very much. Now we recognize a speaker from Iraq.
Yes, these sanctions are unfair. These are imposed upon North Korea and other nations, such as their own, by imperialist powers in the West, who seek only to spread their influence and power at the expense of the global South. And these sanctions are designed solely to punish the Koreans, to weaken them so they'd be more susceptible to imperialist control by the Americans and their allies, who seek to absorb and control all the resources in the world so they may feed their fat bellies back home full of cheap goods as our people slave before them to promote their decadent and shallow society. These sanctions are just fundamentally unfair. They are a punishment by the rich upon the poor, and we call that the sanctions against North Korea and all other nations should be withdrawn immediately, as they are simply a tool of colonization by those who have the power. Thank you. I see the rest of my time.
Thank you very much. Now we recognize a speaker from France.
Thank you. France wants to remind that this is a international body, not a speech on anti-colonialism, which ended decades ago. Regardless, France wants to point out that the sanctions in this case were created and pushed against North Korea for mass human rights violations, for potential underground nuclear programs and a nuclear ambiguity program, which they refuse to end to this day. Missile proliferation, exports of dangerous goods, and imports of dangerous goods. When North Korea is able to prove that none of these still exist within the nation, then France is willing to renegotiate on sanctions. We yield our time.
Thank you very much. Now we recognize the speaker, if I can get back to... Now we recognize the speaker from Argentina.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Compañeros y compañeras, as a nation that is truly from the global south, let us speak quite bluntly here. We have heard representatives from genocidal dictators and hysterical madmen come up here and tell us that the sanctions are hurting their nations. Argentina hears this as proof that the sanctions are working and that the time has come for Iraq, North Korea, and the genocidal tyrants of the world to reform. As a former military dictatorship that has reformed to a democracy, we encourage these sorts of changes. It is increasingly clear to me that these claims of hurting and unjust exploitation are merely projection upon the wider community from the authoritarian autocrats that lord over nations like North Korea and Iraq. We will not be lectured to by the likes of Saddam Hussein, whose hands are drenched in the blood of his victims. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield my time.
Thank you very much. We recognize a speaker from South Korea.
Hello, dear delegates. The South Korean on this issue would speak that we agree with most of our Western allies, but we also have to bring up that through Sunshine Policy that we have enacted during the new millennia has brought us the two states closer and has opened a possibility that could end the suffering that the North is. But then again, we have to reassure that North has to change and adapt. We yield the rest of our time.
Thank you very much. We recognize a speaker from Bosnia, and we are going to end the debate with the closing statement of North Korea. Thank you.
Hello. I have a few questions to the bigger and greater powers of the world. Seeing as North Korea and these other nations are criticized for, let's say, having nuclear weapons, why is it that they should not have nuclear weapons, but nations such as France can openly wield nuclear weapons and even in certain times threaten other nations to use them? I think this is a bit hypocritical, and for a nation to try and impose non-nuclear power, like non-nuclear status for another, I think that they themselves should not have nuclear powers. And for Saddam Hussein, he wasn't brought into power by himself. He was put in power by the Western powers. So now that he's no longer fitting the will of the West, he's being sanctioned. I think that there should be a removal of sanctions, seeing as sanctions are no way
Please
to
mind your
punish
time.
governments. Okay, I buy my time.
Thank you very much. And now for closing, we are giving the floor for 30 seconds to North Korea.
I thank all those who spoke in favor of our nation. And I would like to address 2 points. The Georgians, who wish to apparently yield the UN not as a tool for global cooperation, but as an ideological tool to crush political policies they do not like, which is distinctly not what the UN was for.
Thank you very much. Your 30 seconds is over. We are going to move into the voting phase of the resolution. People have 25 seconds to vote. With the voting time over, the resolution fails. 26 against, 17 in favor, 9 abstention. And now we are moving to the last resolution of today, which is submitted by...
Sadly, much opposition existed in the imperialist core and its allies in the global south, and so, despite support from our own allies, the motion failed to pass and the sanctions remain on our glorious nation. To counteract this, however, the beginnings of a tourist industry is envisioned by our supreme leader, with attractions to suit both a local audience as well as customers from abroad, coupled with a policy of local adaptations of foreign media depending on careful review by the Supreme Leader and the Cabinet. This is the first step in the transformation that Kim Jong-un wishes to take the Korean nation upon, inspired by the education he undertook in China and inspired by their prosperity further. He wishes to inject a Korea flavouring of the reforms of Deng Xiaoping and especially the cat theory. Whilst Korea has its way of life, Juche should not completely reject all ideas and concepts merely because they are not ones birthed internally, and so he has set himself a task of drafting up reforms to the Juche system with the intent to reveal them and implement them after 3 years of hard work and the slow drip feeding of more crucial reforms. Nothing beats a Pyongyang holiday, and right now you can save up to 241 for a family of 4. Don't miss out. Book now with Jet2 Holidays. Package holidays you can trust. This all being said, it is important to note that as any other Korean, our supreme leader is devoted to the nation and Juche. And with that, he decided to continue the nuclear program his father had begun to work on. A miniature nuclear device has already been successfully tested, and after much hard work, the nation is on track to create its first nuclear weapon for its arsenal within 2004, with a large quantity of uranium being transported by our good friend Abdul Qadir Khan. We should be able to have an arsenal large enough to keep the imperialists at bay once and for all. However, somehow, the Americans have managed to catch wind of our plans and our program. We were quick to dismantle and transport the materials that we already had to safer, more secretive locations, and we are working on flushing out any and all potential leaks, so it is merely a matter of time. However, the damage already done is certainly a problem. The US has decided to bring action against the Korean people in the UNSC, calling for complete denuclearization of the nation, in a complete and total disregard for our sovereignty and with little hard evidence of the actual program itself. Our leader went and visited the South Koreans in a bid and plead to prevent them from joining the US in its imperial attempt to conquer the entire peninsula. Hello, I congratulate you on your election win not too long ago. You did a very good job of winning that.
Yes, but it's no more Kim Dae-jung.
No, it
It would
isn't.
be
But
okay, forgive me, but it's wrong move.
that's quite all right. You're still the same party though. No, aren't you?
Yes, yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
of course. That's my understanding. Anyway, your system is quite different to ours, so. But we trust that since it's the same party, you'll be keeping the same policies of sunshine.
Yep, yes, yep. But
Of course.
we're somewhat facing the backlash from the Grand National Party, which views the Sunshine Policy as a bit of a, how do I say this, not step back, but showing weakness and somewhat, how do I say this, goes against the pain and everything else and whatnot. I will not go into details. It's a mess.
It sounds like you're dealing with are you sure that they're not there's no foreign intervention there? Because we know all too well that foreign interventionists love to utilize domestic issues for such a thing, but
As of our, how do I say this, our National Intelligence Service and our anti-corruption offices, there has not been any involvement from any foreign elements.
well, that's good in a way. That's a good sign in one way, but on the other hand, it does make it more difficult to deal with, I guess.
It's
in
a
that case,
national thing.
yes. Well, that being the case, we still do believe that cooperation should take place. I mean, my nation is reforming itself. We're in fact building up some brand new resorts. For tourism. We wish to enter the global market a little bit more. Of course, currently we do not want to open ourselves completely to the threats that we feel come from, not to offend you, but those that you call allies, of course, in America.
I understand that, and that's what we voiced in the UN, that whilst we agree that that you must grow and change and develop with the times, that the sanctions should be reduced. You saw the reply, I hope.
Yes,
we
yes,
were-
I heard it, and I was very thankful for the words, although I do have my own personal opinions on what we consider development. I'm sure they'd differ somewhat, but either way,
It's a step in the wrong, but in the right direction.
it's a matter of we should still cooperate regardless, and otherwise it keeps the nation disunited and in threats. And our friends in Beijing agree on that point, of course, and so we were looking to see if there's any potential for further cooperation potentially between our two nations. Maybe start working on just the beginnings of some form of diplomatic treaty or agreement, or maybe just economic cooperation of some kind, or just any kind of cooperation that shows that our nations are officially beginning to warm up to one another more, perhaps. While I understand it would probably cause some domestic issues with those, just saying, if you were to completely dance around the issue, it will cause you no help either, so to speak.
Agreed. I wanted to mention, you previously mentioned that there was a possible, or we spoke about the possible investments and whatnot, and you said that the region of Hamyong was heavily, how to say this, impacted by the destruction and the civil war in overall, not completely, but overall, the civil war impacted that region very hard, and we think that a good start would be possible investments into that region to fix up its how to say this, infrastructure, and even improve it, so humanitarian aid and overall uh, transport availability improves in that region.
It will certainly. Hamyong would be on our table too. We currently are working on repairing the infrastructure in Guangdong and Pyongyang. That's a lot closer than the Hamgyong, the last on our list, sadly, but the capital section is much more important to fixing the nation. As disappointing as it is to say, we can only focus on one time. If we can begin working on further talks for Korea and organizing further cooperation, then it'd be perfect to show the world that the Korean Peninsula will not be forever divided.
Agreed.
Yes, yes. Is there anything you wish to say? Of course, though.
I mean, on overall the issue, I think we we pretty much said everything that we how to say this, wanted to say in the situation, due to the, like, yes, we agree the sanctions are a bit too much considering the state and overall your whole nation and everything, and the changes it has gone through, and pretty much everything else. Um, uh, uh, but we have to agree that sanctions must stay for a bit, so the Western powers are somewhat satisfied and are not going completely, how to say this, wild.
Yes, yes. I mean, I certainly agree there. It is of course a careful balance to go with. But yes. Well, we're glad that we can go carry on this further cooperation then. Yes, and in that case, we should organize a proper conference. I believe a proper conference that was talked about when it was my father ruling. And that being said, I will of course take my leave and The Korean people, however, stand stronger than ever. We stand firm against the Yankee imperialists, and if the South falls in line with their puppet master, then as disappointing as it is, we must defend ourselves and shield our people from the warmongering of the West once more. Long live Juche! Long live Korea! Long live Kim Jong-un!